My name is Arlo Eisenberg. I'm 31 years old, which is very old in rollerblading years. I've been skating for about 15 years. I won the X Games in 1996. And I was named by People as one of 50 to watch in 2000. I am going to talk about the X Games. In the interest of full disclosure, I have to tell you that I was fired from the X Games 2 years ago. So, whatever biases I may have, or that might show up in my commentary, I just want them to be out in the open. And I'll tell you the getting fired story too in a bit, because it's good. But before I talk about what's wrong with the X Games, because there are some things wrong with the X Games, I'll talk about what's wrong with rollerblading first. The first X Games were in 1995, and yes, rollerblading was a big part of the inaugural X Games and getting that whole thing off the ground. And usually when people mention that, they'll say it like, well, then isn't that a slight or a big slap in the face now that rollerblading is out of the X Games? It's like, you know, everybody was happy to use rollerblading when, you know, when there was a lot of hype around it. It was this new thing. And after I came out to California and, you know, and everybody started doing their things and we started creating the magazines, Daily Bread, Box Magazine, we had the first hoax video. The first inline contest was the NIST series, was in 1994. That was only 1 year after I moved out here. And the X Games was in 1995, the first X Games. So from 93 to 95, that's when we got our first magazine, our first video, our first contest. This is a sport in its infancy, brand new. And then here come the first X Games for a worldwide televised audience. And they're gonna put our sport in prime time, right next to skateboarding, which has been out for decades. And right next to BMX, same thing, decades of history. Skateboarding had Tony Hawk. BMX had Matt Hoffman. You could say, and people do, that inline had me, but it's not the same thing. I'd been in California for 2 years. I'd probably been in one video. Who knows how many issues of Daily Bread or Box that come out? 1? 2? The trick vocabulary was 3 tricks. Front side, back side, and sole. That was rollerblading. So when skateboarders or BMXers were pissed off that inline was there on the same stage as them, celebrated at the same level, they were right to be pissed off. We did not deserve to be there. But we didn't ask to be there. ESPN gave us that forum, and who are we to say no? It was a great opportunity. And what did we know? We were brand new. We didn't know anything. But so what happened is that sowed the seeds of resentment. They hated us. Not just because we didn't deserve to be there, and they resented us because we were sharing that stage, taking that limelight away from them, and because we were imposters to that throne, but because we really did look bad. Our tricks were unrefined. I said we had a limited vocabulary, and it wasn't very good looking. Most of us didn't have much style. I mean, we'd land with our legs all over the place, our hands waving in the air. I mean, rollerblading was not that rad of a thing back then. And I was doing it. I was one of the best at the time, so don't get me wrong. I mean, I love the sport, and I'm proud of our roots and our history and everything, but it was unrefined. And it's a lot different than what's happening right now. I will put rollerblading up against any other sport in the world right now. You give me the best skateboarder, the best freestyle BMX rider on a vert ramp or on street. I'll put the best rollerblader, I'll put the best 10 rollerbladers against their best guy anywhere in the fucking world. You take me to a spot, no, I'll take you to 100 spots that you can't even take a skateboarder to. You can't take a BMXer to. There is no sport right now that's as impressive, as dangerous, or as beautiful when it's done right as rollerblading. And that's the whole irony of the whole thing. When we didn't deserve to be there, we had the stage. And now that we finally got to a point where there's a trick vocabulary, there's superstars, there's Shima, there's Happy, there's the Yasutokos. I mean, this is an incredible sport. This is something that people should see. And now that we've finally gotten here, we're out. And we're out because of that residual resentment that's been hung over. It's been building up to this. It's like this groundswell of hate and resentment towards rollerblading that's just been building up over the years. And as skateboarding's gotten more powerful, and the BMXers have gotten more powerful and more influence and more weight, this resentment has turned back on inline to the point where they are able to exercise their influence. And the television producers and the people that are listening to these guys, they believe it. Yeah, rollerblading's not as cool as skateboarding. Why are we spending time on this when we could be getting a better return on our investment if we focus the energy we had in inline on skateboarding? As shitty as everything is right now, the current state of affairs, I mean, rollerblading has no love, okay? It's an important part of the process. I mean, so it's this weird position where you have to have two minds about it. I mean, if you're going to be an objective, rational observer, you step outside of it a second and you say, okay, I know that this is an important part of the process. You got to weed out all the bullshit. You got to trim the fat and make it a lean sport. Right now, the people that rollerblade only do it because they love it. They're not getting any friends from it. They're not getting any girls from it. No one's high-fiving them on the street going, that's cool. I mean, the only people that do it right now love it. And that's important, because from that, you're able to build a strong foundation and a strong base, so that as people do start glomming onto it, you know that the core is solid. We never had that before. That's part of the reason that it was so easily rattled. Rollerblading's foundation right now is very solid. I mean, we've had a couple of years of this now, of really just sort of being on our own. I mean, Daily Bread deserves so much credit for, I mean, Daily Bread really was one of the very first aggressive skating things exclusively, in the world. Before anything really, the first thing that was like uniquely aggressive skating really was Daily Bread. And it's still there. And that magazine's not getting a lot of support. And there's not a whole lot of advertising dollars to go around, not in our industry, not outside of our industry. But my point is that I'm talking about the things that are there, the things that are weathering this storm, are doing it because they love it. And that means that it's solid. And so that when the money does start coming back to it, the people that will be there in a position to take advantage of it, that they have our best interest at heart. And you couldn't say that about the industry when it was brand new. I mean, there was so much money flying around that people were jumping into it, and no one cared about rollerblading.
But even
Wait. But there's something else. So it's a necessary part of the process, this weeding out. Doesn't make it any less shitty. Doesn't mean we have to be content with it. I mean, a part of our job, our role throughout this is to maintain the struggle, is to fight, not to be content with being shit on. It's just important somewhere in the back of your mind to know that it's making us stronger. And so what will happen when you talk about coming back to the mainstream, or what is rollerblading's future in the big picture? Rollerblading is not going anywhere. Street luge was dropped out of the X Games before we were, probably a couple of years before we were. The bungee jumping, kayak bungee jumping, whatever it was as a sport, was dropped out of the X Games after the first year. Never heard about it again. I don't know, I know people still bungee jump at the mall, but you never hear of it as a sport. I'm sure there are a couple of hardcore guys out there that street luge still, but I would be surprised to hear that they still have a circuit or anything anything more formalized than a couple of guys going out and doing it, midnight runs or something. But rollerblading has not gone anywhere, and rollerblading is not going anywhere. It's too strong. There's too many people that do it. And the reason why is, one, because it's easy, which has always been people always try to throw it out like it's some mark against it, but no, it's fun to do. You can get in them and start skating and have fun. And it makes no, because it's easy to get into, places no limit on how far you can take it. I mean, you only need to open up a magazine or watch a video these days to see the answer to that. But people love it. Too many people love it too much in too many places for it to go anywhere. And you know, this reminds me of an interesting point. Our plight in the US, this is going to sound so ridiculous and gay to say, but really does honestly have a lot to do with the X Games. By cutting out that exposure versus skateboarding and BMX, by not just by showing people skateboarding and BMX and reinforcing that idea that those things are cool, but also at the same time by not showing rollerblading, you're not just saying to people, you're not just ignoring it, because yeah, people aren't seeing it, they're not being exposed to rollerblading, we're not recruiting new numbers. But when they do see a rollerblader, that hasn't been reinforced anywhere as something cool. And the fact that they don't see it next to skateboarding and BMX makes them think, well, there must be something wrong with rollerblading. And so ESPN really has cultivated this culture and this mentality of hate and ignorance where people actually not only don't understand rollerblading, but they really don't respect it. They don't think that it's something worthy of respect because that's the message that they're being sent. Even when we were a part of the X Games, we weren't in the commercials. You show Bob Burnquist, you show Tony Hawk, they show Dave Mirra. They don't show a rollerblader in the commercials. Even when we were in the X Games, when they show it on TV, they'll show hours of skateboarding segments, they'll show hours of BMX segments, but don't blink, because you'll miss the inline. They're not showing a whole lot of inline, even when we were in the X Games. So all these things are constantly reinforcing this idea that inline is inferior to the other sports. Which, by the way, is why I got fired from ESPN. Every year, I've been announcing the X Games, okay? I go and I do the play-by-play for the TV broadcast with Mark Shays. When the guys are doing their runs, dropping in, whatever, I'm the voice on TV going, wow, great run from Takeshi Yasutoko, 540, whatever, all this BS. And I've done that for several years. And every year before we go to the X Games, they have what they call a talent meeting. They bring in all the guys that are going to do broadcast for the TV show. Skateboard commentators, BMX, you know, motocross, all the different things. And same thing every year. They bring us in, we go to the hotel, the host hotel where we're all staying. They bring us into a conference room. Producers come in and talk to us about this year's event, new technology. They tell us, they give us a crash course in editing. You know, there's going to be L cuts, whatever. You know, I don't know what they talk about. But so this year, this infamous year that I'm talking about right now, which was 2 years ago, we go into the conference room, and the guy, Rich Feinberg, the producer, what was his title? Vice President of Sports, who knows? But he was the producer responsible for hosting and steering this production meeting. And he starts out the thing with a video cassette. He says, listen, I had my staff put together this video of highlights from last year's X Games. I think it's really great. I'm really proud of it. My staff worked really hard on it, and I think it's going to get everyone fired up for this year's X Games. So he puts in the tape, turns down the lights, and the ESPN commentator, they've got it voiced over, you know, with his scruffy voice. He's like, Travis Pastrana had to go for the backflip in the X Games, you know, and it's like gritty, slow motion film. It's like they really did. They went all out on this little 3-minute video that they're showing us. And it goes through it. It shows Travis Pastrana doing his backflip. And, you know, whatever. Tony Hawk, whatever. It goes through things, you know, it goes through all the different things. And they never show rollerblading. And they show, you know, and they didn't show a whole lot of wakeboarding. Maybe they showed a couple of shots of a wakeboarder. But there was not even a single throwaway shot of a rollerblader. Not even a flash of Ato looking at the camera. I think the year before, maybe Ty Chris had done his double backflip, which was like pretty momentous for us. But nothing. No mention of anything rollerblading. And this wasn't even for the general public. This was just a little 3-minute thing to show his staff. And he knew that that Mark Shays and I were going to be there, that we're part of this staff. We're part of the X Games. Rollerblading hadn't been dropped yet. And so, and as I'm watching this, and it becomes clear to me that the that rollerblading's not going to show up. I'm like seething, you know? And this is, mind you, this is not just the first flight of this sort. I mean, this is after years of watching X Games commercials and waiting for the rollerblading one, waiting to see some rollerblader hanging out at 7-Eleven with Tony Hawk and Dave Mirra, you know, talking about the X Games, you know, in their fucking commercials. Never happens. And so on top of all this, and now this thing, I've got to suffer this indignity. And so I was furious. And he turns back on the lights. And he's like, yeah, what'd you guys think? And I didn't know what to do. And I felt like I had to do something. And so all I can muster, my idea of a protest, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to walk out right now. And I did. I stood up and I walked out. That was it. That was my protest. And I walked out there and I'm like, well, what the fuck am I doing? I don't know. I walked to the bathroom. I'm standing there looking in the mirror. So I go back in the room, realizing now that it just looks like I got up and I went to the bathroom. I mean, some protest, no one even knows that I protested. But if nothing else, it did cool me off a little bit. So I sat down for the meeting and I'm able to pay attention. Rich goes on with the presentation. He's talking about this stuff. He's talking about the new technology. And he says, we've got some really great new technology this year. We're going to have the cable cam coming over the whole street course. And he's talking about the different things. And he says, and we're going to do something new this year that we've never done before. We've always talked about. He said, but I've got to tell you, we tried a lot of different things. He said, we're going to have a follow cam. We're going to have follow cam footage on the street course, which is something that we've always been advocating, something everybody's always wanted, because it's good to get that close-up, you know, intimate feel on the street course. It really makes the tricks look better. He said, so we're going to have a follow cam this year on the street course. He said, but I got to tell you guys, and he's now talking to the whole room. He said, I got to tell you guys, we tried everything. We thought about a lot of different ways to get this, and it just so happens that the best way to get the footage is by having an inliner on the course. And that really sent me over the edge. He said, so just so you know, skateboarders, he's talking to the skateboarding commentators, you know there's going to be an inliner out there, just so you know, bike riders. And basically, he's apologizing for the fact that there's going to be an inliner on the course getting this follow cam footage. So no mention in the commercials, no mention in the little teaser tape, but the first fucking time that this guy's going to mention inline in front of a room of his entire staff, and with me sitting there, and Mark Shea sitting there, he's apologizing for my sport.
You and Mark say anything, or you and Mark like exchanging any words or anything at all, or just?
This time I turned my back to him, and I picked up a newspaper and I started reading it. I picked up my newspaper, like this. I mean, I was furious, you know? Fucking pissed, out of my mind. And finally he says to me, he says, because, I mean, this is a conference room. I've got my back to the guy. He knows something's up. He says, Arlo, don't you think you should be paying attention to the meeting instead of reading the newspaper? So there he gave me my window, and I guess I jumped through it. I said, why? He said, what do you mean, why? I said, this is bullshit. And he said, oh. He said, what's bullshit? And I told him. I told him what I told you. I said, I told him about the tape. I said, you showed this tape, which you're so proud of. Not a single shot of a rollerblader. And then the first time you mentioned rollerblading, you're apologizing for it. And everybody in the room laughed when he said it. He said, it just so happens we got, or whatever he said. He said some stupid thing, and a guy chuckled out of the room, like, because there was going to be an inliner on the street course. And they all had a big laugh about it. I didn't think it was funny. And so I told him, the first time you mentioned it, you apologized for it, and you guys all have a big laugh about rollerblading. I said, listen, I'm not here just to be some talking head on TV. I'm not here because I like talking about rollerblading on TV. I said, I'm here because I love the sport. I said, and at some point, it just gets to be too much. It's too overwhelming. I can't sit by, you know, while you guys constantly disrespect my sport, what I love to do. And he said, well, we can talk about this after the meeting. He said, okay. And after the meeting, I walked out. I felt like I'd said whatever I had to say. If he wanted to talk about it, he could, but I wasn't going to go up to him, and I left. Later, at some mandatory talent dinner, he came up to me, and it was real uncomfortable because we hadn't spoken since that, and it was kind of like, everybody was kind of like all hushed. And he comes up to me at the dinner. I'm sitting in my seat, all awkward. He's like, "So are you cool?" Something like that. Like, am I cool? And he puts his hand out, like, and what am I going to do? So I shake his hand, but I mean, it's totally inadequate. And we went ahead and did the thing. And then half a year later, 6 months later, I get an email from ESPN. One line, basically, it says, "We've decided to go in another direction for next year's inline thing." That's it. After, whatever, 10 years. How long was I with them? 95? No. Whatever it was. Almost 10 years, probably, yeah. Oh, yeah, in fact, I probably was fired for the 10th X Games. It would have been 10 years. From competing to commentating, I mean, I had a lot of history with them. And you know what offended me most of all about it? I mean, I don't know. I was only mad because I love rollerblading. I mean, you would think if they cared about rollerblading, that they would want people there who cared about rollerblading. They want to have the best product they can have. They want the people there for skateboarding to care about skateboarding. My enthusiasm for rollerblading, my feelings for rollerblading can only make their end product better. I want it to look good for them. What hurt me most was their response to me only confirmed what I knew all along, that they don't care about rollerblading. They don't care about me, they don't care about rollerblading, and you know what was the ultimate proof? Rollerblading was gone the next year. And so in a way, lucky fucking me, I didn't even have to suffer the disrespect, the indignity of being dropped with my sport. I didn't have to suffer them saying, "You know what, we don't want you guys anymore." I told them this is bullshit, and they fired me on my fucking terms. At least I got out with my dignity. But you know what? I get angry and I get emotional about it. And I want it to be clear that this is a reflection more of my feelings for rollerblading than my feelings towards the X Games or ESPN. Because listen, ESPN and the X Games, it is what it is. They are what they are. And that's fine. I don't need the X Games to be daily bread. I don't need the X Games to be Video Groove or, I don't need them to be responsible for, the culture of our sport or any of those things. But so there may come a time, talking about the mainstream, that I'm so angry right now that it's hard to imagine ever doing anything with them again. Who knows, maybe they don't ever want us again. But you have to believe that if all things followed their course, if we stayed on this trajectory where inline is what it is, it's as impressive as it is, whatever people's feelings are about the sport now, they can't maintain those feelings forever. Skateboarders used to hate BMX. And then you know what happened? Matt Hoffman happened. 900s, backflips, flares, 20 feet out of a quarter pipe. I mean, you can only say something's gay for so long, and then when the evidence accumulates and gets to be so much, there's a point where you look like an idiot if you tell Matt Hoffman that he's a fag. What he's doing is just irrefutable. It's undeniable. Same thing's going to happen with rollerblading. I mean, you can only watch so many kids do a 100-foot drop-off ledge before at some point you say, "You know what? I can't really call that gay anymore. It's too dangerous." And so that will happen. But what we know, we're on the cutting edge. We have our finger on the pulse. What we know right now, it's going to take other people 2 years to know. So while we're all going, "Hell yeah, inline is sick. Why don't people see it?" Well, they're not watching our videos. They don't read our magazines. Not only are they not watching them, they don't want to see them. They like keeping this image of a rollerblader with big jeans and a giant chain coming out of his pocket, stumbling around a street course. They don't want to know that it might be something really cool and legitimate and credible. But they can only deny it for so long. At some point, the evidence will become too overwhelming. And at that point, we'll have to reevaluate our position. ESPN will reevaluate our position, or whoever's, comparable to ESPN at that point. And I find it hard to believe that inline won't be embraced back into the mainstream at some point. It's just a matter of time. Is it 5 years from now, 10 years from now, or 2 years from now? So the current state of things right now is that rollerblading is, by all appearances and by any standard, underground. I mean, we are strictly underground. The only people that do it, the only people that know about it, are people that do it. I think the only people that do it are the people that do it. But the point is that rollerblading is strictly underground. It's only rollerbladers. There aren't people like hanging on to it. We don't have groupies, and the only people that know about it are the people that do it. We have a closed network right now. It's not being seen outside of rollerblading. It's not being seen out of our own videos and our own magazines. You won't find it on TV. And there are people who will say, good, rollerblading is better off being strictly underground. They look at ESPN, they look at the skateboarders, fat pig skateboarders, and they go, I don't want to become that, more money than they know what to do with, looks like there's no soul, looks like it's all grind, and that movie Grind that they made. It's in the action sports world, in action sports culture, the worst thing you can tell anyone is that they sold out. I mean, we place such a premium on being genuine, on keeping it real, all that stuff. And so people look at skateboarding, rollerbladers look at skateboarding, and they go, you know what? They sold out. And it looks like it, selling pizza tacos on TV and the biggest video game right now and the movies and everything. I mean, it really does look like, this is a sport, a culture that's gotten way too fat for its own good. And it's become obscene and gross with its size. And so the people say, well, good, let us stay underground. Let rollerblading stay underground because it's more virtuous. There's something more credible about that. We're keeping it real. But I think that that's bullshit. Because what they're mistaking, because when they look around, you see 20 kids at a skate park and none of them know how to skateboard, and they've all got the newest BAM, skateboard deck, and they've got the BAM shoes or whatever they're all wearing. And rollerbladers take pride in knowing that when they see another rollerblader, usually they're looking at someone that's a lot like them, that's in the know, that's cool. And skateboarding used to be like that. But let me tell you something, that at the core of skateboarding are skateboarders just like rollerbladers that They're still there. They haven't gone anywhere. And in fact, those kids, those 20 kids that you see at the skate park, well, they may have nothing to do with those core skateboarders. It's not like they're hanging out at the same places. Those guys aren't friends. But those 20 kids are paying for those skateboarders to make a living doing what they love. And we don't have those 20 kids supporting us. And we're not going to get them staying underground so that Chris Haffey or Aaron Feinberg, who just got fired from his sponsor, one of the greatest rollerbladers we have in the history of our sport of all time, he can't even get paid. He can't even get thrown a bone from his sponsor because there's no money in this industry. And when people say, cool, it's cool that we're underground, I say, fuck that. What these guys do is too dangerous. I mean, I think it's cool that the only people who do it now are doing it for the love, that the only reason people have to skate right now is doing it for the love. But when I watch a video with Alex Broskow and Chris Haffey and Brian Shima, what these guys do and how dangerous it is, and when you hear about what they're getting paid, when you're talking about hundreds of dollars, maybe 1,000 something, if they're doing good, I mean, you've got to be kidding me. And they're not getting health insurance or anything like that. These are people risking their lives because they love it, which is rad. Good, I'm glad. But don't tell me good that we're underground, let's keep it that way. Those guys should be getting paid. I mean, you've got third-rate skateboarders making millions of dollars on shoes. They don't even have to skateboard. Their name can sell the shoes for years. And Aaron Feinberg is getting dropped by his sponsor. It's cool to be core. Do that. Don't say keep rollerblading underground. Say, you know what, I'm going to stay underground. Don't keep rollerblading off of ESPN. You stay off of ESPN. I think it's important to always have a core, but it's also important to reach out to the mainstream and to try and keep money moving in through the core so that it can sustain itself. If you're going to be a viable industry, and that's what we want to be, you don't want to just be 2 or 3 skaters in every city with nowhere to buy product, no products to buy, no companies to buy them from, just sitting around, you know, jacking each other off about the new latest combo that they did on the handrail. I mean, there's got to be money, and that money has to come from somewhere, and we can't just keep giving it back and forth to each other. You have to grow the sport.